Greetings and welcome to Chapter 6, The Politics of Public Opinion. You know, when we think of public opinion, we should often think about polling, right? The various different types of polls, exit polls, the polls leading into an election. We should often think about, measuring or what our opinion is. What is the public's opinion on a particular topic? So we're going to look at some definitions, of course, as usual, and we're going to be taking a look at some examples, and we're going to be talking about how we measure public opinion. With that said, let's get started. Okay, so public opinion is a collection of opinions of an individual or a group of individuals on a topic, person, or event. So that's what public opinion is, right? It's just a collection of opinions of an individual or a group of people on a specific topic or person or event, right? So that's what we're talking about here. Often when we think of public opinion, we hear, do you approve or disapprove of so-and-so or of such and such, right? One of the polls I like to conduct in my classes is a very simple, non-scientific, almost meaningless poll, but it proves a point here, right? If I were to ask you, or if we were to conduct a poll of this class, and I were to ask you, do you prefer Chick-fil-A or Whataburger? Well, most of the time, and this one's always heated, right? I would say Chick-fil-A usually wins, to be honest with you, but it's always a close call. The point I'm trying to get at is that's a poll. That's a public opinion poll, right? I am asking for your thoughts. I'm asking for your opinion about Chick-fil-A or Whataburger, right? So the reason, so this is a good way to introduce this topic, right? We can think of another public opinion poll. Do you prefer Marvel over DC Comics, right? Do you prefer Captain America over Spider-Man, right? These almost meaningless polls that I'm asking, they are in fact polls, right? So it's a good exercise because then we can use that, how we form those questions, how we collect that data, right? This is a good way to dive into public opinion about our thoughts on issues or events or a specific topic, such as do you approve or disapprove of the way Congress is handling its job, right? This is a Gallup poll that was conducted on May 2nd through the 22nd of 2022. And notice that the size of the size here. You can always this N that you see right up here. This is what it says N equals 1,007 adults nationwide. What that is telling you is the sample size of this poll is 1,007 adults that was polled nationwide. Right? That's what it's telling you. The sample size is 1,007 people, individuals that were a part of this poll. Right? And so this is the question that's being asked. Now note that let's see here. That in May, right, May 2nd through the 22nd here, right, see that the approval of Congress handling its job, only 18% of people said, yeah, I approve of the job that Congress is doing, right? Notice the disapproval rate, 77%, 77, well over half. In fact, this is over 3/4 are saying no. I completely disapprove of the way that Congress is handling its job. Also note that there's 5% who say I'm unsure. Now, we should note a couple of things real fast, right? You see what on top where it says margin of error? What that's telling us is that there is potential error in this poll, right? There is potential error. Either the reality is, let's see if I can do some quick math off the top of my head here. Either 14% actually approve of the way Congress is handling its job, or it's possible that 22%. That the reality isn't 18, the reality is actually 22% approve. Likewise, the 77% disapproval rate. This in reality is either, let's see here, 81%, if I'm doing my math right real quick off the top of my head, disapproval rate, or in fact, it's actually about 72%. And of course, the unsure, either it's plus, either the unsure rate is actually 9% or it's 1%. Right? The margin of error, plus or minus 4, is telling us that there's potential problems, human error. We're going to be taking a look at some various aspects why polls have some error to them. We're going to be taking a look at that. But just note that it's in ballpark of 18% approval rating here, right, with this latest poll. Now we can take a look at some trends here, right? We can go back to, let's see, July of 2021, right, where the approval rating was actually higher, it was 26%, plus or minus 4. So that means that it's either the approval rating really in reality is actually 30%, or in fact, it's actually more closely around 22%, right? And likewise, and so on. So we can look, by polling, we can identify some trends about what we think, what the American people believe, what we think about our institutions, about events, about certain people, about certain topics. It's fascinating, right? We can continue on. Looking at, do you approve or disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling his job as president? Right? This is a Gallup poll that was conducted from May 2nd to May 22nd of 2022. Note again the size of how many people were involved, how many people responded to this poll. That is 1,007 adults polled nationwide. Right? Notice again that the margin of error is plus or minus 4. So these results that we see, just plus or minus 4, and that might be the actual reality. Right? That's the margin of error. So with here in the May of 2022, we see that there's 41% approval rating and a 54% disapproval rating. Now, we can take a look at these trends, right? We can take a look at these trends and notice that we see some fluctuation, not only in terms of the approval rating, but also the disapproval rating, right? We can take a look about a month before. Again, approval rating is again 41%, but the disapproval rating is higher, right? And then what it would be a month later, right? So we're seeing some fluctuation here, but that is our opinion, right? I mean, think about things that can happen, right? Events that can happen, tragedy, natural disasters, a president says something they probably shouldn't have, a scandal comes out, something that can change our tone, not our tone, but that can change our perception, that can change our opinion. That, that one thing that they said, oh man, I really didn't like that. Or that one thing that they did, you know what? I may not like him or her that much, but you know what? They did that one thing. My hat goes off to them. I have some respect for them, right? And so things happen, things change, and our temperature, if you will, changes along with those. So it's interesting to note this. And it's not just limited to Congress, by the way, or the president. We can even look at the Supreme Court, right? Do you approve or disapprove of the way the Supreme Court is handling its job? Now, there's a couple of things we need to note here, right? There's a couple of things we need to know. Note how old this poll is. Right? It's 2019. September 3rd through the 15th of 2019. Of course, we've had a lot happen since 2019, and some of it actually involves the Supreme Court. But what's interesting is that the Supreme Court, while it is a institution established by the U.S. Constitution, it's not really a political institution, right? I mean, think about it like this. They are not subjected to the elections process. In fact, the Supreme Court, they are in fact appointed by a president and then confirmed by the U.S. Senate. That's how they become justices on the Supreme Court. So I'm not too surprised that the most recent Gallup poll I can find is from 2019. Why? Because they're really not a part of the political process. Now, of course, obviously they have a deep impact on society. Right? We have seen Supreme Court cases dealing with civil liberties and civil rights. Of course, they have an impact on society. And I'm not downplaying that impact whatsoever. They play a vital role in society, absolutely. But it's supposed to be above politics. Again, they're appointed, not elected, right? So it's not really a political institution, though it is a institution of government, if that makes sense. It's a little nuanced, right? But that nuance needs to be noted. I digress. Let's get back to these numbers, right? So it's September 3rd through the 15th of 2019, right? We have the approval rating of 54% of Americans. We have 42% disapproval, 4% unsure, right? We need to note a couple of other things real quick. Notice that the sample size is larger. We have 1,525 adults polled nationwide. Notice that the margin of error has changed as well. Why? Well, as the margin of error, as the sample size gets bigger, you have a bigger snapshot of the entire population, the margin of error, you should expect that to go down, right? Because you're getting a bigger portion of the population, right? So we have 1,525 adults polled nationwide, and we have a margin of error plus or minus 3. So what does that mean? Again, going back to what we just discussed a couple of slides ago, that the approval rating could actually be about 51%, or it could be higher, about 57%, right? Likewise, disapproval, we have either this is 39%, or it could be as high as 45%. And unsure, it's either 1%, or it could in fact be about 7%. And again, we can take a look at these trends, right? We can take a look at over time. What's public opinion like towards the Supreme Court? How do we view the Supreme Court? And it makes no surprise that we see some fluctuation, specifically when we think about Supreme Court cases that might have been heard in those years, right? Excuse me. So it's no surprise to me that we see this fluctuation because our opinions change, right? Our opinions change. So, but how about some political issues? Now we've taken a look at polling, right, of specific institutions. But what about some specific and maybe controversial issues? Let's take a look. Right, the Gallup poll here again, May 2nd through the 22nd, 2022. Note again the sample size, 1,007 adults nationwide. We have a margin of error plus or minus 4. Right, so again that sample size came down, the sample size decreased, so we should expect an increase in the margin of error. Right, so the Gallup poll here, the question that was asked of these 1,007 adults nationwide. Do you think abortions should be legal under any circumstances, legal only certain circumstances, or illegal in all circumstances? Now, I really enjoy how this poll is worded, right? Note that it doesn't lead us to a specific outcome. It doesn't provoke a specific thought of emotion or anything like that. It's just asking us, right, our opinion, and it's asking basically for three opinions, right? So note here in May 2nd through the 22nd of 2022, 35% said always legal, 50% says sometimes legal, 13% says always illegal, with 2% being unsure. So what's fascinating here, right, is that this middle column, this sometimes legal, about half of Americans support it being sometimes legal, right? Which is really interesting because does that match up with what's going on regarding this issue? Is this matching what's going on politically now in the states, in the state legislatures, or even at the national level with the Supreme Court, or even with potential laws that Congress may or may not pass? Right? Does this match our opinions? Does policy match the public opinion of Americans? That is a question to ask, right? Because we pay media and candidates and our elected officials, they pay attention to polls because this takes a temperature of what we're thinking. More on that in a bit. But just it's interesting to note. Now, what's also interesting is to note the fluctuation here, right? Note the fluctuation, how it is bounced back and forth, but for the most part, right, we see it staying about half of the population supports it legal sometimes. So again, does that match policy? Does that match what we're seeing and what we're hearing at the state level? It's an interesting thought, right? Or what does it match what we're seeing at the national level, right? Again, it's an interesting thought. Now, I should note though, real quick, despite what we may or may not think about this particular issue, because I know it's a sensitive, very controversial issue. I get that, and I hear that. We all have deep opinions about this, strong opinions about this, like I do. But when we live in a democratic republic, right? Think back to the previous lectures when we talked about the types of government. When you consider the fact that we are a democratic republic, right? That we have representatives that represent people from the states, that we have elected officials that we elect in our congressional districts, that we elect at the state in the statewide elections to represent us in the U.S. House, Senate, right? Does Congress, do they pursue policy that matches public opinion? Now, whether we want to see abortion banned outright or whether we want to see it legal, okay, we can make campaigns, we can make pushes for however we believe. Absolutely, there's nothing. In fact, that's extremely American of us, right? The idea of influencing policy. Put that to the side. Put our ideological differences or our ideological beliefs to the side just for a second, and just this question of, does policy outcomes, does it match public opinion, right? Is there a disconnect? Should there be a disconnect? Should there not be a disconnect, right? On this, it's good questioning for analytical thinking more than anything, but you get what I'm saying, right? I mean, there should be somewhat of an expectation of what public opinion is, the majority of public opinion, and policy outcomes. Now, again, we can influence what public opinion is through campaigns, social media campaigns, right? YouTube campaigns, political campaigns. Absolutely, we can shape that one way or the other. But ultimately, does public opinion match policy outcomes? It's a good question, right? Another controversial issue, right? Gun laws. This poll was conducted January 3rd through the 16th of 2022. Again, note that the sample size here, we have it a little bit smaller. We have 811 adults polled nationwide. Again, our margin of error is plus or minus 4. That's kind of a high, it's a high margin of error, just like we saw with the 1007, if I remember the number right? But nevertheless, we still have this high margin of error because our sample size is small. Yes, it has decreased from about 200-ish from the previous poll that we looked at, but nevertheless, we still see a high margin of error. I digress. So this question. Next, we'd like to know how you feel about the state of the nation in each of the following areas. For each one, please say whether you are very satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, or very dissatisfied. If you don't have enough information about a particular subject to rate it, just say so. How about the nation's laws or policies on guns? Now note that this was taken January of 2022. Right? We see that in terms of our nation's laws and policies on guns, about 41% says they're satisfied with the status quo as we have it at this juncture of January 3rd through the 16th of 2022. Again, plus or minus 4 margin of error. So either it's in reality 45% that says that the population as a whole says we're satisfied, or okay, sorry, I'm inferring now. Either it's so the plus or minus. Let me collect my thoughts here. So we have this a sample size of 811, right? So this margin of error is plus or minus 4. So we're looking at 30. What, about 38? No, about 37 if I'm doing my math right. About 38% actually are satisfied, or it could be as high as 45%. Right? And likewise, either this is in reality is 60%, that's well over half the population says no, we're dissatisfied, or in reality it's more closer around 42%. I mean 52%. So it's interesting again to note these trends, to note how to note that it's fluctuated, it's changed. Now again, I would expect some change. I would expect to see fluctuation as we hear of tragedies, as we hear of more mass shootings, as we hear about concerts, victims from concerts, victims at schools, right? As we are seeing and hearing these horrific stories of loss of life due to an individual taking up an arm and killing people. Okay? I would expect some fluctuation. So what we see now, going back to that question I asked a moment ago, do we see policy outcomes that match the majority opinion? Should it match? Does it matter if it matches? Right? That's kind of up to you and I as individuals to determine that for ourselves. Right? It's a good question to ask. It's a good question to ponder. Yeah. So it's interesting. Right? So yeah. Here's another poll for us. Now this is from a different source, right? This is from I'm not even going to try to pronounce this college's name because I'm going to butcher it. I'm just being honest. But this university put out a poll, right? A note March 10th through the 14th of 2022. Our sample size, note, it's almost 2,000 here, right? It's 1,936 adults polled nationwide, our margin of error has decreased, right? It's 2.2%. That's 2.2. Reason why is we have a larger sample size, right? Larger your sample, the less the margin of error you will have. Larger your sample, the smaller the margin of error will be. So I digress. The question that was asked in this poll: how much of a problem has the price of gasoline been for you and your family lately? A very serious problem, a somewhat serious problem, a not too serious problem, or not a problem at all. Now, let's take a look at these results, right? 37% says very serious, 27% says somewhat serious, 21% says not too serious, 14% said not a problem at all, and 1% said unsure. So the majority opinion here, even though I say majority, the opinion that's gotten the most response, right, is this very serious. This is a very serious problem. So, question, and I keep coming back to this: does it match policy outcomes? Right? What's Congress doing, trying to tackle gasoline prices? Are they doing enough? What should they do? What can they do? Or is it possible that gasoline companies who get to set the prices of gasoline, are they benefiting from supply issues? Or do they have the capability to lower gas prices? Is there enough resources? Is there enough gasoline that we can, in fact, lower gas prices? Or is this the time to push for green energy? Is this the time to wean off of fossil fuels and go to more of a clean energy? This can be a very controversial topic. It can go there very quickly. But these are the types of questions, right, that when we see these polls, we think of, oh, wow, this is a serious problem. What can we do, right? We often think about these different debates and where we fall. What do we think about this, right? So it's interesting to note that, right? One last issue I want to take a look at, right? Foreign policy. Gallup poll, note, April 1st through the 19th, 2022. Again, the sample size 1,018. So from the previous poll, we've decreased. Our margin of error is back. It's increased up to 4%, to plus or minus 4 now, right? So the question that was asked: as you may know, several million refugees have left Ukraine to escape the situation there. The situation being the war, right? The Russian invasion of Ukraine. Would you approve or disapprove of allowing up to 100,000 of these refugees to come into this country? Now, I should note, I made an editorial there, right? I defined the situation there. Right? I told you that's the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I gave that a piece of information. They didn't. All they said was this situation there. We're going to come back to why they did this. In short, it was to make sure that it didn't lead you and I to a specific answer. In short, I'm giving you a spoiler there, but bear with me. We'll get to that in just a moment. Would you approve or disapprove of allowing up to 100,000 of these refugees to come into this country? Note that 78%, well over half say yes, they would approve. 21% says no, they would not approve. 1% says not sure. Right? Again, it's plus or minus 4% here. In reality, this could be significantly higher. This could be well up, 82%, right? This and then the disapproval rating could be as low as about 17, 18%. So it's interesting to note that. But well over half say they approve. Right. the situation in Ukraine is a humanitarian crisis. This is man-made crisis by Putin and his desire to somehow reform the former Soviet Union. Problem is, Ukraine is a nation state of its own with its own independence, and it doesn't want to go back. It doesn't want to be under Russian rule, right? So we will talk about American foreign policy, and we will dive into different approaches. One of those approaches we will be looking at is this idea of isolationism, right? That where we have too much going on here at home, we need to fix home before we can venture out. It should be all about America first, and we should just stick to here at home. I understand that tendency. I hear you loud and clear. You may be thinking the same thing. But we have seen through wars like World War II, what happens in Europe, what happens around the world will impact us at some point. And we're going to dive into hegemony. We're going to be diving into the Cold War. We're going to be taking a look at all these factors. I'm just giving a small taste, right? That public opinion, we have a say. We are an actor when it comes to foreign policy, right? Our temperature regarding these foreign policy issues, this can help push for or against certain policy, certain foreign policy positions or proposals that are being made. It's interesting to note that. All right, so let's continue. Let's dive back into what is public opinion, what makes it public opinion, and etc., and the benefits of this. Right. So the benefits of measuring public opinion. People's beliefs and actions are motivated by opinion. Right. The way we act, the way the Facebook posts that we make, the Twitter posts that we make, those Instagram, those social media posts that we make, right? If they're about politics, they're motivated by our opinion, right? And we don't just come up with these ideas. We don't just think of these ideas randomly, right? It helps to explain political behavior, not only of candidates and political parties, but also of you and I. Right? So one of the examples here of understanding political behavior of political parties, right? The Democrat Party moved away from the use of liberal in the 1990s and 2000s. The party adopted words such as opportunity, smaller government, investments, and choices, right? And public opinion helps rationalize changes in policies. Right? Why is it that we see this one opinion, then all of a sudden it gets changed, and then we see policy changes coming from that? Well, public opinion can help us understand why we're seeing those shifts. Remember, we looked at those issues, we looked at those trends about how public opinion fluctuated. Well, those fluctuations can be reflected in policy outcomes. Can be. Not to say it always will, but remember, Congress is always, members of Congress, right? They're always running low scaled because they never know what issues we're going to use, and they are in tune with public opinion because they need to be if they want to get reelected. But I digress. So taking the temperature of the people, the impact, the reason why we have public opinion. This public opinion takes our temperature, indicates our fervor, or it tells candidates, political parties, our disapproval or our apathy towards a certain topic or a certain event. Right? It's a snapshot. It's a selfie. It's a selfie of our opinions for that moment in time, right? About a certain event, certain topic, certain individual, etc. Right. So this taking these snapshots, taking these polls, specifically when we talk about election polls, okay, it gives us an indicator who will win this race. And speaking of winning races, right? The media they put politics in this context of a horse race, right? Have you ever noticed that? I'll make sure that this CNN video YouTube link is available to you. Okay, I will make sure of that because it's interesting to know how they talk about public opinion polls, how they talk about these election polls before the election, before actual election day, right? Oh, candidate X is ahead. No, candidate Y is now ahead. Oh, but look at candidate A, right? And they talk about in that way of what can they do to get better? What can they do to get ahead of the polls, right? And they only talk about those who are doing well, right? Those who are not doing so well at all in the polls. They will be mentioned because they're not doing well, but you're not going to hear them talk about what do they need to do to get ahead, right? What if you do, it's just going to be this one real quick discussion point, and that's it. Right? The point I'm trying to get at is it's a horse race, and it's portrayed that way. And polls gives us indicators. It gives us information to place it for you and I to talk about. Oh, well, so-and-so is low in the polls. Well, what can they do, right? What do they need to do to get ahead, right? It puts it in that context. Politics, in reality, is a sport. It truly is. So the bandwagon effect. Increased media coverage of candidates who poll high. Those who are doing well will get more coverage, right? The more momentum a candidate builds up, right? The more stories will be written, the more stories will be covered. They will be discussed more, right? So the more momentum a candidate receives, the more and more they will be in the public's eye, right? And the media would be talking about them, which means that you and I are going to be talking about them, right? It's interesting to note this dynamic between public opinion and this horse race, right? So recall our discussion on ideology, right? So remember the ideologies are the beliefs and ideals that help to shape political opinion and eventually policy, right? So where do our opinions come from? But we're not born a Democrat. We're not born a Republican. We're not born an independent. We're not born a libertarian or a Green Party for that matter, right? So where do they come from? Where do our political thoughts come from? Well, to answer that question, we have to dive into political socialization. We have to. This process. But political socialization is the process of learning the norms and the practices of a political system through others and societal institutions. So, real quick, I have a story for you. And it's from Facebook. It's about Facebook. So, I was on Facebook, and I saw a friend of mine made a post. And the post was, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe these parents would do this." Let me give you some context. They shared an image of two parents at a protest, and they took their kid. When I say kid, I mean like under 5 years old. We're talking about a kid, okay? Maybe even up to a baby, right? So we're talking about a kid here. Doesn't really have a good understanding of politics for that matter, right? They're at that age. And the kid is holding a sign. Okay, and the sign says I'm going to clean up this language, but it says something to the effect of F the police. Okay? And this baby, was holding this. They were big enough to hold a sign, but that's about as far as it goes. They held a sign that said F the police, but they didn't say just the F. They actually spelled it out, right? And my friend made the comment of like, I can't believe these are horrible parents. How dare they? And I chimed in, right? I chimed in and said, well, now, hold up. You and I may disagree with the content. Fair enough, right? We have different political views. You do, I do, we all do. It's all good, okay? While we may disagree with the political message, my hat goes off to those parents, I said. And the reason I said that to her, or to my friend here, is because they were teaching the kid, they were teaching their child to participate in the political process when they are upset. When there's something happening they are not happy with, protest. They were teaching that child political norms. Now, you may disagree with the content of the message. You may disagree with that parent's political views. And that's fair enough, right? That's absolutely fair criticism. And was that sign the best sign for that child to hold? You know what? Again, fair. That is a fair question. But those parents were being good parents. Why? Because they were teaching their child how to participate politically. That's it. So, political socialization. It's the process of learning the norms and practices of a political system through others, family members, media, the press, etc., and societal institutions, churches, so religion, schools, etc. So, anytime a parent teaches their child, right, how to participate politically, I don't care what the content is. I don't care what the position is. I don't care what political party they belong to. My hat, or if I had a hat, but I will always salute them and support them because that's how you do it. That you're teaching, right? You're teaching them. You're engaging in political socialization. I digress. Let's get back to this, right? So, political socialization. So we have these agents, right? These agents of political socialization. We have the family unit, right? Think back, right? Most of us are introduced, right, to politics. We're introduced to how we're supposed to engage with politics from our family for the most part. That's our first agent. Now, is that to say that that's our only agent? No. No, not one bit. But you see where I'm going with this, right? We're usually either we're highly involved, right? Like my parents, they involved me in political conventions, in election night, not cookouts, but they were election night get-togethers to watch, the votes being tallied up and being counted. They took me to when they actually voted. They took me in there with them as a child, and then when I was growing up. So the point I'm trying to get at is, some of us have had that experience. Maybe some of us have had the other experience. Well, you know what? We just didn't talk about this, which is still teaching you, right, not to engage in the topic. I'm not saying one way is better than the other, right? I'm not trying to make any kind of assertion like that. I'm just trying to get at is, for most of us, our family introduced us to this topic one way or the other. Either it was, supporting of, or, that's too divisive. We're not going to talk about that, right? But we got introduced to politics that way. Schools, likewise, whether we're talking about K through 12, grade school, or whether we're talking about college, right? Like this class, you're learning about politics. Maybe this class, right, influences you, right? You're being taught, what political discourse is, how you should engage in that. You're being taught these, your ideas of how the world works, maybe not being questioned, but you're asked to explain, you're asked to engage, right? So maybe through this process, right? And I should have mentioned this earlier, my apologies. This political socialization process, it starts the moment you are born and it ends when we fade away, when we pass away. To be honest with you, to be frank, this is forever ongoing. It never stops. Right? We can have certain events that can impact our lives. We can have certain events, certain things that can happen that can change our political views. Right? Point I'm trying to get at is it's forever ongoing. We don't stop. Even when we develop political opinions, things can happen that can change those political opinions. Okay? I forgot to mention that earlier. So, agents of political socialization, peer groups, friends, acquaintances that we know, etc. That can influence. You can be taught these political norms by them. The news media, right? If you get your news from paper, from TV, whatever the case may be, you are getting news from somewhere. Right? And this is an agent of political socialization. You're learning through reading and through news reports how we should engage with our political system. Events, even. Particularly tragic events. This teaches us. Right? Prime example that I like to use. I believe it was the Parkland school shooting in Florida. We saw massive amounts of middle school, high school, and maybe even earlier grades than that. We saw high schoolers, we saw students at the grade school level come out of the woodwork to protest. They marched across cities, they marched across the capitals, they demanded action. Right? Events like that, and tragic events and political events that lead after those, that follows those tragedies, that is an influence that can shape, that has the ability to teach us political norms. Those kids who protested, whether you're for that protesting or not, whether you think they were right or you think that gun control is not the answer, regardless of what your opinion is, right? Bear with me here. That process of being a participant in that taught them what to do politically. It taught them political norms. That's what I'm getting at. Right? Social media. We got to talk about this as an agent of political socialization. And I'm not going to lie. This one scares me. This one scares me a lot. Social media. Where do I start? The 2016 presidential election. I started to see in friends and family how they were being taught political norms from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram. They were being taught how to engage in this political system that we have through social media. Now, I don't know about you, but social media, we often feel empowered, right? You will hear and you will see things online that you normally never would see in real life. Because when we're behind that keyboard, whether it's a phone, right, or whether it's a computer keyboard in front of us, we feel empowered. We'll say things we normally don't because we're behind that keyboard. There's some, right. There's something there that I'll say that here, but I won't say that in face to face. So that part bothers me. And on top of that, social media, where anyone and everyone argues, and most of the time we see ad hominem attacks. Those are attacks against someone's character rather than attacking the actual argument. So, for example, let's use President George W. Bush. Okay, President George W. Bush. He was consistently made fun of for his Bushisms, for the way he spoke. right? Making fun of someone for how they talk, that's not attacking the argument. That's attacking the character of an individual, right? We see that on social media about Democrats, about Republicans, about independents, about everyone under the sun. And if this is where we are taught, if we are seeing friends and family adopting what they and doing in real life what they're seeing on social media, that scares me politically. Forget what position you and I may have. Forget you and I might be Democrat and Republican, or you and I are both Democrats, or you and I are both Republicans, or both of us are independents. Put that to a side. If we are seeing people learning how to engage in our political system through social media, that again, I say that's scary. Now, does that mean that I'm saying that social media is evil? Of course not. I'm not saying that one bit. I'm on social media. But if we're learning norms, if we're learning political norms, and how to engage with people politically through social media, there's a bit of a problem. And there's research going on right now. Political scientists are looking into social media being an agent of political socialization. So we're going to have to see what that research says. Am I making something out of nothing? Maybe. We'll have to see what that research says. Right? But I digress. Let's keep moving on. So a sample, right? We mentioned earlier N, right? N equals 1007 or whatever the case may be. That N is telling us the sample size who were a part of that poll, right? Well, a sample is a group of people who represent a population that has been selected to answer questions. Now, remember, I was talking about, like, even though we had a poll that had only 1,007 adults nationwide answering this poll, notice that I said, though, right, I was talking about how this represents the population. Well, we don't have to poll every American to know what the general public thinks, right? Think back here. Bear with me for one moment, right? Bear with me. Do you cook? Do you have a family member that loves to cook, or do you have a friend that cooks? Do they cook soup or chili or something like that? Right? Or maybe you do. Maybe you enjoy cooking. Maybe you make soups. Right? Do you have to eat the entire batch to know if you need to add salt or to add pepper or to add something to it? No. You get a tasting spoon, right? Or you get a spoon. You dip it in, you take one small sample, and you go, okay, that's good. I don't need to add anything to that, right? Same way, likewise here. You don't have to taste the entire soup to know that it's good. Likewise, we don't have to poll every American to know what public opinion is, right? That's the point here. We don't have to poll everyone. We don't. We just have to get a large enough sample size to represent that. That's it. Right? So, common types of polls. We have the straw poll. This is an informal and unofficial election poll conducted with a non-random population. I'm weary of straw polls because since it's non-random, they are asking specific people. So if you're asking, I don't know, if you're asking only Democrats, that poll is biased. If you're asking only Republicans, that poll is biased. People need to be selected at random, which leads me to this. Random sample size, or a random sample, is a limited number of people from the overall population selected in such a way that each individual has an equal chance of being chosen. It's completely at random. So if you have completely at random a selection of Democrats and Republicans, that's going to be that's not going to be biased in the context of political parties. You see where I'm going with this? If everyone is selected at random and everyone is given an equal chance of being selected, you're not going to have a huge bias problem. Exit polls. What is an election poll taken by interviewing voters as they leave the polling place. Now, we gotta talk about these. First up, I just want to be upfront about this. Your vote, when you choose to vote, that decision that you make is private. You can keep that to yourself if you want to, or you can share it. You can make a Facebook post proudly stating your support for a particular candidate. That is your choice to make. If you want to tell everyone you know who you voted for, that is your choice. You get to do that. But if you're leaving a polling location and you are asked, who did you vote for? It is your right to tell them, hey, I voted for so-and-so. Or it's also your right to say you're not interested. It's also your right to tell them, no, I'm not going to tell you that. It's up to you. But I don't care who's asking you. I don't care if it's me. I don't care if it's your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, your grandma, your grandpa. I don't care if it's the president of the United States. I don't care if it's the police. I don't care if it's a sheriff. I don't care if it's the FBI. I don't care. It is your choice to indicate who you voted for. It's also your choice to say nothing. I had a student tell me once they were pressured by a exit poller. Someone who was trying to take this exit poll, and that bothered me. Right? So I always feel like I need to share this piece of information. That's your choice. Now, like I said, it's your choice whether to tell everyone or not to. That's all I'm getting at. But these exit polls are unofficial, interviewing voters as they're coming out, who they voted for. Now, this is extremely problematic because, while yes, these are supposed to be voters voting, absolutely. The problem is, you may not tell the truth. Let's be honest, we all know at least one individual. Usually we know someone who likes to joke around, play around, right? Lie. Who'd you vote for? Oh, you know what? Because I know what you're looking for. I'm going to play with you. I'm going to tell you the wrong answer. Right? We know someone like that, right? And that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that those polls, they have some problems, right? Sometimes we might just give what we think is the socially acceptable answer. While I may have actually supported one way, I know that if I say that candidate's name, that I'm going to be shunned, that I'm going to be looked down upon for some reason because it's not the socially acceptable candidate, right? So we have some of that happening here with these polls. I want to be very upfront with you, as polls are important for you and I to talk about, and they help us to give us an indication of who's going to be winning, and it sets the ground for us talking about this. Polls do not mean outcome of an election. Just because a candidate is 52% or 55% in the polls, that's not an election. An election dictates who wins, not polls. Though it gives us an indicator, true, but the outcome is the actual election day, not some kind of polling. I just wanted to get that. I just want to say that. Anyways, push polls. Politically biased campaign information presented as a poll in order to change minds. But those in office, those who are elected, those elected officials, they can use polls as a way to be campaign information rather than scientific polls that we see with the Gallup poll. Tracking poll, a poll that asks respondents the same questions over a period of time to determine changes in public opinion. This is where we gauge, trends. Are there trends in public opinion? When we can use a tracking poll to track that. To pun intended, to track that. So there are some problems with random sampling. Margin of error, I mentioned that earlier. That is the number that states how far the poll results may be from the actual preferences of the total population of citizens. Right? So that margin of error, the larger your sample size, the smaller that margin of error would be. While we do not have to taste the entire soup, while we do not have to test the entire or poll the entire population, we just have to do a sample. Nevertheless, we still have a margin of error based upon that sample size. Okay. And of course, survey methods vary. We have telephone, face-to-face, internet, and how questions are worded. This is a problematic part of polling. Does a question lead you to a specific outcome? How is that question asked? Real quick, just a real quick story. Real quick. My wife and I we were eating at this restaurant called McAllister's. If you ever have a chance to go. They're great. And they gave me my receipt and said, "Hey, if you fill out this survey, you get a free cookie." Now, I gotta stop here and say I love their cookies. I absolutely love their cookies. The sugar cookie is like a lemon sugar cookie. Right? I just love these things. Okay. So they gave me my receipt, and my wife and I we took a seat at our table, and I put my receipt in my pocket. Right? Well, as I put the receipt in my pocket as I was walking. Did I complete the survey? No. Even though I was enticed with a free cookie of my choice, I didn't do it. Why? Time. I didn't want to take the time. And I'm just being honest with you. I didn't want to take the time to put out my phone, hope my internet works, that the service was good enough for me to fill out this survey. And even if it was a simple 2-question poll, it still took time out of my day to do that. Call me lazy. It's true. I'm lazy. But you see where I'm going with this? The point I'm trying to get at, right, is that even though I was enticed with the free sugar cookie, I didn't do it. Some of us, we don't answer the phone. If it's a number that we do not recognize, we don't answer it. And even if we do answer it, if they ask you, "Hey, would you be willing to participate in a national poll?" Most likely, you and I are going to say, no. I mean, I think we should engage in that. But let's just be honest. What are we actually going to do? Right? Let's just be honest. When face to face, most of the time, just not interested. Got other things going on. I'm too busy to engage in that. Right? So there are some problems with respondents. Do we want to take the time to do that? Even when we're given a choice, even when we're given the enticement of a free cookie, do we actually participate? Right? So that's one problem. Other problems are leading questions. Leading questions is a huge problem for any kind of survey or poll, right? Regardless if you're doing research and you're conducting a survey of a population or whether it's a political poll that's out there. Leading questions are extremely problematic. What is a leading question? I'm glad you asked. Let's take a look. Do you approve of the president's handling of the economy? That's not really a leading question. A leading question is a question that leads you to a specific outcome. They are leading you to answer a certain way. Right? That's what we're talking about here. Should Congress increase funding for national parks, as they provide a relaxing vacation destination for many American families? Is that a leading question? Yes. Yes, it is. Should Congress increase funding for national parks? If that was the question, done. This would be a wholesome, fine question. But it didn't stop there, as they provide relaxing vacation destinations for many American families. This is leading us, right? This is leading you and I to a specific outcome. Do you think Liz Cheney will run for president? This question, regardless of where we stand, regardless if we like or don't like Liz Cheney, this is a non-leading question. This is a good question. It's worded in such a way that does not lead you or I to a specific outcome, right? But B does. B absolutely does. It leads us, right? So those are examples of some leading. Now, that one B here is an example of a leading question. A and C, they're good. So, limitations on polls. Okay, we're wrapping this up now. We're wrapping up this lecture. So, polling limitations, they exist, right? Limited respondent options. We're asking usually yes or no questions. We're asking disagree or agree questions. You're not leaving a blank. You're not giving me the ability to elaborate more. You see what I'm saying? And that's a problem. If you're asking polling questions such as, do you agree with abortion or not? And that's all you ask. That you're really can't say yes, I really can't say no. There's actually somewhere of a middle ground. I can't say that, assuming that's my position. You see where I'm going with this? Just asking straight up binary questions, 0 or 1, right? Either or. When you ask such questions, you're not giving the respondent the opportunity to give nuance. So a respondent may not answer how they truly feel, or they have to somehow fit their opinion in this binary 0 or 1 way that just doesn't work. So that's a problem. A lack of information. Everything ranging from the information that's provided is just not enough to the information that you and I have about a certain topic is just not enough. Let me be very upfront with you. I love politics. I absolutely love this topic. Do I know everything there is to know? No. I have specialties, right? I have certain specialized areas within political science that I'm classified as an expert in. Absolutely. But do I know everything there is to know? No. So there's some limitation on the information that is provided to me in the information that I possess about a topic, right? How much do we know what Benghazi is? Do we know where it is? Right? You see where I'm going with this? Yeah. Difficulty measuring intensity. Binary answers, yes or no. Disagree or agree. This is problematic. It doesn't reflect the intensity, right? I can't just grab my phone and hit 5 as hard as I can to indicate some kind of intensity. I can't do that. Just because I say yes or no to a specific question, that does not necessarily indicate how I feel, the intensity on how I feel about that specific choice. Does that make sense? The lack of interest in political issues. This is a big one. This is a big one. It's been my experience that we are often apathetic. We are often, politics is too boring. It's too competitive. It's too controversial. It's too difficult to understand. These are all the reasons. The reasons I hear, at least, from students and from others, that they're just not interested in politics for those reasons. And if I was going to be honest, that's how I feel about sports in general: football, soccer, tennis, basketball, baseball, all that. don't care. I just don't. I'm very apathetic towards it. So I can relate. I can understand, right? And that I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to get into this because it's too boring. It has no real impact on my life. Well, my I hear and I understand that point of view. I do. I get it because that's how I view sports. But what Tom Brady does with the football has no impact on my taxes. What the Houston Texans or the Houston Astros do in their performance on the field has no impact whatsoever on on my livelihood, has no impact on my my decision to do anything politically. Does that make sense? It has no impact on my freedoms. None. It doesn't. Sure, it might hurt my state pride or my pride in a team. Sure, maybe. But it has no real significant impact on my daily life. So, because of that, right, we just have a lack of political issues. Interest in political issues. We just don't really care. And I get that. I understand that. Because politics is confrontational. It is controversial. It is complicated. And I get it. I do. Breaking through that barrier is hard. But I'm digressing. Right? The halo effect. Again, this phenomenon that occurs when respondents provide socially acceptable answers to questions related to morals, ethics, and legality. Right? So, if I were to ask you, right, would you eat dog meat? Now, let me be clear. I'm talking about grabbing a dog and cooking it for the intention of eating it. Bear with me. Okay, I'm an animal lover, but bear with me, right? If I were to ask you that question, okay, you would most likely say, "Are you nuts?" No, I'm not going to do that because that is a socially acceptable answer. Now, I'm changing parameters from the polling here, but bear with me. If I were to say, "Would you do it for $1 million?" Right? We might change our tune. But the point I'm trying to get at is we will provide socially acceptable answers, right, on questions that relate to morals, ethics, and legality, even though we may actually break the law. What do we think about the speed limit? Yeah, we break it every day, but you're going to tell me to be a law-abiding citizen, I need to obey it. Right? So these socially acceptable answers to these questions. It's interesting. Public opinion, to wrap this up, public opinion is extremely fascinating because it gives us a snapshot. It gives us an indicator of what you and I think. And our elected officials need to know what you and I think. They are there to know. Part of their job is to represent you and I, which means they need to know what you and I think. I often hear people talk about, well, I don't want to bug my representative. Hogwash. You're not bugging them. They are there to be bugged. They are there to hear from you and I. So, public opinion, to wrap all this up. It is taking the temperature of what we think of a specific topic, event, or person. Right? So, with that said, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or complaints, please feel free to give me an email. Other than that, we will see you next time. Peace.